Good afternoon, I'm Karen Holmes Ward. Welcome to CityLine. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is under attack in government, higher education, and corporate America. Conservative lawmakers across the country are pushing anti-diversity bills to eliminate DEI programs in government and schools, and some corporations are making changes to programs and policies in the hopes of avoiding being caught in the crosshairs of lawsuits aimed at challenging DE&I. News Center 5's Jessica Brown has more.
At least 10 states have new restrictions on DEI, including Alabama, Florida, Idaho, Indiana, North Carolina, North Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, and Wyoming. In Texas, state universities have laid off dozens of employees in DEI-related positions.
For most of us Black students, these are our only letters of recommendation. These are the only people that we can get close enough with to build a further relationship with us.
A lot of them were just there for me and gave me a lot of resources, and were always there when I was unsure of what to do or if I just wasn't feeling right about something.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed the state's higher education law. DeSantis says it eliminates liberal ideology on college and university campuses. Democrats say it simply promotes the governor's conservative agenda. Leaders of the congressional minority caucuses are demanding the restoration of the House Office of Diversity and Inclusion. The ODI was disbanded last month as part of a government spending bill in the latest blow to the DEI movement. Once the Supreme Court set new limits on affirmative action in higher education, ruling that schools can no longer use race as a factor in student admissions, criticism and calls to eliminate other diversity programs increased.
So the backlash to DE&I initiatives is extending to corporate America. Some companies are cutting back funding and trimming staff. Companies are also concerned about lawsuits targeting programs designed to support women and people of color. Joining us now are Dani Monroe. She's founder and CEO of Center Focus International Incorporated, host of the Martha's Vineyard CDO Summit, and Dr. Tina Opie, a researcher, strategic consultant, and associate professor of management at Babson College. Dani, I want to start with you. You conducted a survey focused on the positive contributions of the senior DEI roles in companies. Can you share with us how you determined the focus of the survey?
Sure, Karen. The focus was pretty simple, actually. I'm a strong component that if you don't create your narrative, somebody else will. And what we've been seeing is a very negative narrative around DEI as your lead up, illustrated. And so this focus was really on about what's the asset, what's the positive, what's the impact that chief diversity officers are bringing to their organizations around DE&I, and really what's the role, because a lot of people are talking about this work who don't understand the work. They don't understand the role of the chief diversity officer.
Speaking of that, what is the role of a chief diversity officer? What role does that CDO play, and how do they impact the business?
Yeah, so the role is similar executive C-suite level professional, and that the role actually is one of being a strategic innovator, a bridge builder, a catalyst for change, a storyteller. It is looking at how you actually move the organization forward on its business initiatives. Oftentimes, Karen, what we're talking about or thinking about DE&I is from a human capital perspective, but this work, when done well, executed well, really becomes about the business strategy of the organization.
Tina, let me turn to you, because this debate over DEI is really active on social media. CEOs like Elon Musk, Mark Cuban weighing in, Musk calling DEI racist, Cuban touting the benefits to the business. So do you think these conversations are influencing public opinion or shifting the narrative around DEI?
Thank you so much for that question, and thank you for having me. Well, I want to echo some of the things that Dani just said, which is that, yes, the conversation may be being shifted based on some of the very public comments of individuals like those you just mentioned. But I want us to reflect on the fact that many of the businesses who committed to DEI are still, I think it's something like 80%, according to Fortune. So while there are some individuals who are attempting to tell us that DEI no longer matters, those organizations that are aware of the strategic implications of DEI, who are thinking forward to, for example, 2050, will there will no longer be a numerical majority in terms of race in the United States, those companies and those leaders are focusing in on how ensuring that they hire and recruit people who are diverse, ensuring that they have inclusive and equitable organizations will actually give them a competitive advantage in the workplace, because those are the places where individuals are going to want to work. There will always be a segment of the population that is resistant to this kind of work, and we've seen this throughout history. I think it's important for us to recognize that and come to terms with the fact that the pendulum is now swinging, but it's swung throughout history, back and forth. But hopefully, as Dr. King says, we will see that the arc goes
The
towards
arc of
justice.
the moral universe bends toward justice. In fact,
Absolutely.
Dani, your research showed that CDOs impact the business positively. Yet,
Yes.
as Tina just said, we're hearing that DEI budgets are being cut, practitioners being laid off. So what can be done to shore up the profession?
Yeah, to shore up the profession, Karen, first of all, we need to standardize the profession. There's been some good news and not good news in terms of what happened in terms of the hiring of CDOs during the George Floyd era. Organizations had a knee-jerk reaction to what was going on at that time and hired a lot of people who were in CDO roles who really didn't have the training as a CDO. They may have been a business leader, they may have had a social justice background, but understanding this work in terms of all of the skills that are necessary to do it, you need change management skills, you have to understand the business of your organization. You have to understand how organizations actually operate. You certainly need to understand the differences around self-identity, but there are
Dani, there's so much to consider. We're almost out of time. I want to ask Tina, how do you deal with the political backlash against DEI?
Well, I would say, I think about the 20-60-20 rule. There's always going to be political backlash. I am very much focusing, though, on the majority of the population supports DEI work. So we can be distracted by some of these individuals. And mind you, I'm not saying that we underestimate them, but I think we have to keep our eye on the ball. There are many more people who support the work that Dani's doing, the work that I'm doing, the work that some of these leading organizations are doing. I say the way that we combat the political backlash is by doubling down on the importance, the strategic importance and imperative for DEI.
That's a point on which we can end. Dani and Tina, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to link to the full CDO report on our website. And don't forget, everyone, the Martha's Vineyard Chief Diversity Officer Summit will be August 6th to 9th on Martha's Vineyard. You can learn more at wcvb.com/CityLine. Up next, the backlash against DEI, the view from an activist and insider when CityLine continues.